This is your time to let go. A journey of calm and serenity. Follow the rhythm of my voice into deep rest, with every note of the music, designed with soothing frequencies, allowing your body, mind, and soul to drift into perfect relaxation. And now take a deep breath in and out and in and out. It is the evening of the 27th of March, 1999. The air is heavy with clouds, thick with moisture, and over the rolling Serbian countryside, a storm quietly brews. Darkness has already claimed the land, and the only light that remains is the faint glimmer of distant flashes across the horizon, as if the sky itself is whispering of what is to come. The fields are quiet, the villages sleep, but above them, in the blackness, a shadow moves. That shadow is not a bird, nor a simple aircraft, but the sleek silhouette of a machine designed to be unseen. The F-117 Nighthawk. It glides silently, its angular surfaces bending and breaking radar waves, making it appear not as a massive bomber, but as something no bigger than a bird, no larger than a tennis ball. Its black skin melts into the night sky, and only the faint roar of its engines reminds the world below that something is there, passing through the storm. Inside, Lieutenant Colonel Daryl Zelko sits alone in the cockpit. He is focused, steady, his eyes scanning his instruments, his thoughts moving between the present and the task ahead. His mission tonight is precise: to fly into the very heart of danger, to strike the command center of the Serbian Air Force in Belgrade. The building below will be full of men watching the skies, men whose job is to find him, to stop him, and if possible, to destroy him. Yet here he is, flying directly toward them, a phantom in the night. He listens to the hum of the aircraft, feels the subtle vibration of the controls in his hands. Around him, the cockpit glows in soft green light from the displays. The sound of the engines is steady, almost comforting, like a low hypnotic hum. Outside, the storm clouds move slowly, heavy and restless, but the Nighthawk carves its path cleanly through them. Behind him, escorting F-16 Vipers had flown as his guardians, armed with missiles to protect him from enemy radars. But as the formation reached the Serbian border, the radio crackled. The voice of the Joint Forces Air Component Commander filled the silence. Due to severe weather, escorts returned to base. One by one, the Vipers turned away, their engines vanishing into the night. And suddenly, Zelko is alone. Alone in the storm, alone in enemy skies, alone with his mission. The silence feels heavier now, as if the sky itself is pressing down on him. Every raindrop against the canopy, every flicker of lightning in the distance feels magnified. His breathing slows as he focuses. He knows that if he is to survive, he must remain unseen. He must remain a ghost. Below, the Serbian countryside stretches endlessly. Forests like dark shadows, fields like pale patches beneath drifting clouds. Small clusters of lights mark villages, faint and fragile, while rivers glisten faintly under the storm's brief illuminations. It is a landscape of silence, of waiting, of suspense. And somewhere within it, hidden in the dark, men are waiting for him too. They are not ordinary men. On the ground, an anti-air missile battery has been prepared. The commander of that battery is Lieutenant Colonel Zoltan Dani. He knows that something special is coming tonight. Serbian intelligence, through whispers and signals, has told him that a ghost of the sky may pass overhead. For weeks, he and his men have trained, prepared, sharpened their eyes, and tuned their machines, hoping that one day they might achieve what others thought impossible, to bring down a stealth aircraft. The night grows darker still. The Nighthawk presses on. Zelko's instruments are calm, his course steady, his target approaching. Above, lightning arcs through the storm clouds, but the machine remains hidden, invisible, gliding silently forward. His heart beats in rhythm with the engines, steady, steady, steady. On the ground, Danny stands before his men. The P-18 radar hums to life, its massive dish sweeping the storm-filled skies. On the screen, countless signals appear. Dots of rain, echoes of clouds, ghosts of interference. The men scan carefully. At first, nothing appears unusual, nothing but the noise of weather. But Danny watches closely, his eyes tracing patterns through the chaos. Then, faint, almost too faint to notice, a dot, a single point of light moving differently from the rest. A dot that moves not like clouds, not like rain, but like a machine. His breath slows. "I see it," he whispers. "The ghost is here." Above, Zelko feels nothing unusual. His aircraft glides forward, silent and unseen. Yet far below, men are whispering about him. Men are pointing at a dot on a screen, a fragile trace in the storm. They cannot see him with their eyes, but they sense his presence. They know he is there. The night holds its breath. The storm watches. The ghost continues on its path, and the hunters prepare. The mission has only just begun. Far below the flight path of the Nighthawk, the Serbian countryside lies restless. Villages tucked beneath the rolling hills breathe in silence, unaware of the drama about to unfold in the sky above them. Farmers sleep in their stone houses, their dogs curled quietly by wooden doors. Fields stretch out like dark carpets. Trees sway in the wind, and a storm drifts slowly across the horizon. The night is heavy, but in that heaviness, men are awake, men with a purpose, men who have waited for this night. In a hidden clearing, where camouflage nets are stretched over machines and dark shapes crouch low against the earth, an anti-air missile battery comes alive. The men who operate it are tired, but sharp, hardened by weeks of constant vigilance. They know the stories of an American ghost plane, the stealth bomber that cannot be seen, that cannot be touched, that cannot be stopped. The Americans call it invisible. The world calls it invincible. But here, in this cold Serbian night, there are men who believe otherwise. There are men who think, tonight maybe, the ghost will bleed. At the heart of this battery stands Lieutenant Colonel Zoltan Dani. His posture is calm, but his eyes are restless, darting across instruments, across men, across the invisible sky above. He has heard whispers, reports fed to him by sources that slip through borders and carry secrets like contraband. Tonight, the Americans will come, and if they come, they must be stopped. Danny knows his weapons are old, his radars outdated, but he trusts in his men, in discipline, and in patience. Sometimes, patience kills more effectively than any missile. Activate the radar, he commands. The order is firm, but not rushed. The men obey, and the P-18 early warning radar begins to sweep. Its massive dish, like a giant listening ear, turns slowly, sending out low-frequency signals that stretch into the stormy heavens. The machine groans and hums, and then, like a brush painting on canvas, faint dots begin to appear on the radar screens. Most of them mean nothing. They are echoes of raindrops, phantoms of clouds, shapes born of interference. They dance and flicker, confusing, inconsistent, like the trembling of candlelight. The younger soldiers mutter to themselves, straining to distinguish what is real from what is noise. They see nothing, nothing that looks like a plane, nothing that looks like an enemy. But Danny is older. His eyes are trained, his instincts sharpened through years of watching skies. He stares, unblinking, searching for movement, for rhythm, for the one dot that does not belong. And then he sees it, faint, small, a dot that does not flicker like the others, a dot that moves with intention, slicing forward steadily, silently. Danny leans closer. His breath slows. The storm hums around him. Lightning flashes distantly on the horizon, but on the radar, the dot is unmistakable. There, he whispers to himself. I see it. The ghost is here. His men look over, their faces tightening. The atmosphere in the cabin thickens. Every man feels the weight of the moment. They are not supposed to see this plane. They are not supposed to even know it exists, except as a rumor, a myth. And yet here it is, a faint trace against the storm, a phantom reduced to a trembling dot of light. Targeting radar, Danny orders, louder this time. The crew responds instantly. A switch is thrown. Another radar system hums to life. Its purpose is clear. Lock, track, destroy. But as the screen brightens, it shows nothing. The dot is gone. The ghost has vanished. The men glance nervously at each other. I don't see it, one says. Nothing, says another. The screen is dead. Danny narrows his eyes. He knows the stealth bomber is still out there, flying closer, invisible once again. He knows their window is short. Keep looking, he commands. It's there. It has to be there. Above, Daryl Zelko flies on, unaware of the whispers, unaware of the hunt building beneath him. The cockpit hums quietly, his instruments glowing with calm precision. For him, everything is routine. He is invisible. He is untouchable. His mission continues without interruption. He breathes steadily, his body relaxed, his eyes occasionally flicking to the horizon, where lightning flickers like brief curtains of light. But he does not know. He cannot know that below, men are watching. That below, a hunter has seen the faintest trace of his presence. That below, the earth itself is listening for his heartbeat. Back in the cabin, The men's voices rise. Still nothing, one mutters. I don't see it. Another insists. Tension mounts. The dot is gone, as if it never existed. The storm laughs at them, scattering noise across their screens, mocking their desperation. Some of the younger soldiers begin to think maybe they imagined it. Maybe it was nothing but interference. But Danny is silent, his jaw tight, his eyes unblinking. He trusts his instincts, and his instincts tell him the ghost is still here. And then, suddenly, the radar flickers. For an instant, just an instant, something brighter appears. A signal stronger than before. A shape. A return. And Danny knows why. High above, in the belly of the F-117, Daryl Zelko opens his bomb bay doors. The aircraft prepares to release its payload. But in doing so, for just a fraction of a moment, the bomber's perfect invisibility cracks. The open bay reflects radar waves, expanding its signature, making it larger, brighter, more visible. And in that tiny slip, that tiny mistake, the hunters below see it. I have it, one soldier cries. Phi 2 is tracking the target, another shouts. The cabin fills with noise, with tension, with urgency. Danny's voice cuts through like a knife. Phi 1 is tracking. Phi 2 is tracking. Launch. The order is final. The men obey. 2 missiles roar from their launchers, their engines igniting the night with fire and thunder. They streak upward, cutting lines of light through the storm clouds, climbing toward the heavens where the ghost still flies. The ground shakes with their fury. The men cheer, yet their eyes are wide, their hearts pounding. For the first time, they have a chance. For the first time, the myth of invisibility is breaking. Above, Zelko feels the shudder as his bombs release, dropping toward the target below. Explosions bloom far behind him, brief flashes against the storm. His mission is a success. Another strike completed. He steadies his plane, begins his climb, heading for safety. And then, the cockpit screams. Warning lights flare red. An alarm wails, urgent and piercing. His heart stops for half a second as his eyes dart to the display. A lock alert. He is being tracked. He is being hunted. Through the storm, he glimpses them 2 fiery trails cutting upward, splitting the clouds, growing larger by the second. Missiles. His missiles. His death streaking toward him. The ghost is no longer unseen. The ghost is no longer safe. The hunt has begun. The storm crackled with electricity as the missiles tore upward, their white-hot exhaust carving twin scars into the night. Each second stretched into eternity as Daryl Zelko's heart pounded against his ribs. The cockpit that had been calm and silent just moments before was now a chamber of alarms. Red lights flashed. The sharp mechanical voice of the warning system repeated its cold mantra. Missile launch, missile launch, missile launch. His hands tightened on the stick. Training surged into muscle memory. The F-117 was not built for dogfights, not built for evasion. It was a scalpel, not a sword. Its design was meant to avoid detection entirely, not to survive once it had been seen. But now it had been seen. And Zelko knew he had seconds, maybe less, to cheat death. He banked hard, pushing the jet into a violent turn, the G-forces crushing his body into the seat. The stealth bomber was sluggish compared to fighters, but Zelko made it dance as best he could, trying to bleed the missile's lock, trying to break free. Sweat burned into his eyes. His breath came in short, sharp bursts. He had been trained for this, but training could never equal the reality of two burning lances of destruction screaming toward you through the sky. Below, in the Serbian battery, the men held their breath. The missiles climbed higher, their guidance systems locked, their paths straight and merciless. Zoltan Dani stood perfectly still, his arms folded behind his back, his face an iron mask. Around him, his soldiers whispered prayers, clenched fists, eyes wide with the madness of hope. No one had ever done this before. No one had ever touched the ghost. But tonight, perhaps, would be different. The first missile reached altitude, arcing toward its prey. It flew so fast, it seemed like a beam of light. Yet in Zelko's eyes, it moved with the inevitability of fate. He pulled harder on the stick, his muscles screaming, his teeth grinding, as the bomber strained against its own weight. The first missile streaked past, missing by a hair's breadth, exploding harmlessly in the black void beyond. The shockwave rocked the F-117 violently, rattling its frame, throwing Zelko against his harness. But he was alive. One missile gone. The second was not gone. It climbed, correcting, adjusting. Its electronic brain locked firmly onto the stealth jet. It cut through the storm clouds like a dagger through silk, closing the distance with merciless precision. Zelko's eyes flicked to the altimeter, the radar warning, the horizon all meaningless. There was no escape. He tried anyway. He banked again, desperate. The F-117 shuddering under the strain, the wings screaming against the forces pulling at them. And then, the missile struck. The explosion lit the night like a second Sunday. A ball of fire bloomed in the sky, its orange and white fury flashing across the fields and villages below. Farmers awoke, dogs barked, windows rattled. For an instant, the night was brighter than day, and within that inferno, the invisible was made visible. The missile had not struck directly. It had detonated near the F-117, close enough for its fragments and shockwave to tear through the fragile skin of the stealth jet. Panels ripped open, electronics fried, hydraulic systems bled. The cockpit shook violently, alarms screamed louder, and Zelko felt the aircraft convulse, as though it were a living thing in its death throes. Smoke filled his nose. The controls jerked in his hands, no longer obedient. He fought them anyway, trying to level the jet, trying to coax it back into flight. But deep inside, he already knew. This was the end. The Nighthawk was dying. He pulled the radio to his lips, his voice sharp, clipped, but trembling beneath the surface. "Mayday! Mayday! I've been hit! F-117 going down!" Static crackled. The words flew into the night, carried on frequencies he could only pray would reach friendly ears. Below, the Serbian crew erupted into cheers. Men clapped each other on the back, shouted, laughed, with a kind of madness only born from the impossible being made real. They had done it. Against all odds, they had done it. The ghost had been touched. The ghost was bleeding fire across their skies. Danny allowed himself a small nod, the corners of his lips twitching into the faintest smile. But inside, he knew the truth. The hunt was not over until the beast lay dead upon the earth. Up in the sky, Zelko made his final decision. The jet was finished. Flames licked along its fuselage. Control systems gone. Hydraulics bleeding into nothing. The bomber rolled, spiraled, dropped lower and lower. The fields below spun into a blur. There was no saving the machine. But maybe, just maybe, he could save himself. His hand shot to the ejection handle. Every pilot knows it. Every pilot dreads it. The last resort. His fingers wrapped around the cold metal, and for a brief moment, time slowed. He thought of training. He thought of the instructors who told him never to hesitate. He thought of the night silence before alarms shattered it. And then, without another thought, he pulled. The cockpit detonated with a blast designed not to kill, but to save. Explosive bolts fired, the canopy blew free, and in an instant, Daryl Zelko was ripped from the dying bird. The ejection seat screamed upward, throwing him into the night, into the storm, into the unknown. He felt the air tear at him, cold and violent, until the chute deployed, snapping him into a sudden, brutal stillness. Below him, the F-117 spiraled, its black skin torn and burning, its once invisible form now a falling star. It screamed as it went, a trail of fire behind it, descending toward the Serbian soil. Villagers would later say they saw a dragon that night, its wings aflame, crashing into the earth. Zelko dangled beneath his parachute, the storm whispering around him, his breath ragged, his eyes wide. He was alive, but alone. And below him, in the dark fields of a foreign land, hundreds of eyes were already searching the skies, searching for the ghost that had fallen and for the man inside it. The hunters had drawn blood, but the hunt was not yet over. Chapter 4. The ghost falls to earth. The fire in the sky faded, but its echo lingered across the dark fields of Serbia. Farmers stepped outside in their night clothes, eyes lifted toward the heavens where streaks of smoke still glowed like scars across the stars. Dogs barked furiously, sensing the unease that clung to the air. Somewhere in the distance, a bell tolled, not for mass, not for mourning, but because someone had pulled the rope in shock, as if to wake the whole village to the miracle unfolding above. Daryl Zelko drifted downward, suspended between heaven and earth. His parachute bloomed above him, a pale silhouette against the storm-dark sky. The wind tugged at him, rocking his body back and forth. He could feel the cold night air pressing against his skin, hear the whistle of wind rushing past the cords. For a fleeting moment, there was a kind of silence, broken only by his ragged breathing. He had survived the explosion. He had escaped the burning coffin of his jet. But now came the second death, the descent into enemy soil. His eyes scanned the ground. Dark patches of farmland stretched beneath him, broken only by the lines of hedges, the faint glimmer of rivers, and the distant glow of small villages. Every light seemed to him a threat. Every shadow seemed to hide an enemy. Somewhere down there, Serbian soldiers were already moving, guided by the fiery trail of the falling jet. They would be racing to the crash site, racing to find him. He tightened his grip on the parachute straps, trying to steer himself toward a darker, emptier patch of earth. He needed shadows. He needed silence. The earth came up fast, faster than it ever seemed in training. His body tensed as the ground rushed to meet him. With a bone-jarring thud, he landed in a muddy field, rolling hard, the wind knocked from his lungs. The parachute dragged him, pulling at his shoulders, threatening to expose him if it caught the breeze. He wrestled with it, fingers fumbling with the buckles until the cord slipped free. The canopy collapsed, blending into the wet earth like a shroud. He lay still for a moment, heart hammering, chest heaving. Alive, bruised, battered, but alive. Then came the silence. A vast, oppressive silence, broken only by the far-off barking of dogs and the faint rumble of engines. They were coming. Zelko rose to his knees, every instinct screaming at him to move. He tore the survival kit from his harness, his fingers automatically checking its contents: radio, map, compass, emergency beacon. But the beacon was useless here. It would sing to the wrong ears. He shoved it back, knowing he was alone. No cavalry would ride through the night to pluck him from these fields. Not yet. His survival depended on vanishing. He crouched low, sinking into the mud, his dark suit blending with the night. He began to crawl, slow, steady, each movement deliberate. He knew the rules of survival. Do not silhouette yourself against the horizon. Do not run unless you must. Always move toward cover. He scanned for it: now trees, a ditch, anything to hide him from the eyes already sweeping the fields. In the distance, headlights cut across the landscape, beams of yellow probing like the eyes of predators. Trucks, military trucks. The hunt had begun. Voices carried faintly on the wind, harsh commands in Serbian, shouted from man to man. The villagers too had seen the fire. Some would run to watch. Some would run to tell. All of them would point to the place where the ghost had fallen. Zoltan Dani, back at the command post, was already in motion. Word had reached him that the target had been hit. His men cheered, but he silenced them with a single glance. There was work to do. Wreckage could be proof, but a pilot alive would be a prize beyond measure. He barked orders, crisp and calm, sending squads racing into the night, their boots pounding the frozen earth. Radios crackled with reports. The plane had gone down near the village of Bujanovci. Every man who could hold a rifle was sent toward it. Meanwhile, Zelko stumbled into a ditch, sinking knee-deep in mud. He forced himself onward, each step a battle against exhaustion. His body ached from the ejection, bruises blooming beneath his skin, muscles screaming for rest. But rest meant capture. Rest meant chains. He pressed on, his ears straining for the sound of pursuit. Somewhere behind him, he heard a dog bark closer, sharper, a hunting dog. His breath caught in his throat. He froze, pressing himself flat against the cold ground. For a long, agonizing moment, he did not move, not even to breathe. The dog barked again, then again, nearer still. He could hear its handler shouting, the language sharp and foreign. Panic surged like fire through his veins. He reached for the pistol in his kit, fingers brushing its grip. But what good would it do? One man with one pistol against a village, against a battalion, against the whole night. No, survival was not in gunfire. It was in silence. He forced himself still, his body becoming mud, becoming earth, praying the night would hide him. Minutes stretched like hours. The barking faded. The voices moved away. Zelko exhaled slowly, his breath trembling. Alive still, for now. Above, the stars broke through the thinning storm clouds. Their cold light glittered on the wet fields, on the winding streams, on the distant roofs of the village. Somewhere out there, the wreckage of his jet burned, and men were swarming over it, shouting in triumph, pulling blackened panels from the soil. Somewhere out there, radios buzzed with victory. The Americans had said the Nighthawk was untouchable. Tonight, that myth lay shattered in a smoking crater. And Daryl Zelko, the man inside the myth, lay in a ditch, covered in mud, shivering from cold and fear, listening to the sound of his hunters spread out across the night. The ghost had fallen, but the story of his survival had only just begun. The first hours after a crash are the most dangerous. Every man in uniform knows it. Daryl Zelko knew it better than most, drilled into him in every survival course, every training exercise. If you are hunted, they will come for you quickly, before confusion dies down, before the night grows old. Strike fast, overwhelm the ground, search every field, every road, every ditch. Capture the prey before it has time to vanish. That was the enemy's playbook, and tonight it was being read aloud in the Serbian countryside. The night, which only minutes ago had been alive with thunder and fire, now quivered with movement. Engines rumbled along narrow country roads. Headlights stabbed through the hedgerows like lances of white fire. Voices carried shouts, orders, curses in Serbian. Somewhere a woman's scream rose and fell, not of fear, but alarm, calling neighbors to come and see. To some it was spectacle, to others it was opportunity. A downed American pilot meant rewards, pride, a piece of history. For the soldiers, it meant glory. For the villagers, it meant whispers of power. Everyone was moving, and all were moving toward him. Zelko crouched in his ditch, every muscle taut, his breath slow, controlled, his mud-smeared face blended with the earth, his black suit swallowed by the shadows. The survival manual had told him, "You are safest when you are part of the landscape." He clung to that truth as if it were gospel. Yet even as he pressed his body flat, the vibrations of passing trucks trembled through the ground beneath him. They were close, too close. Above the ditch, a beam of light swept. He froze. The grass above his head glowed silver for an instant as the flashlight cut across it. The beam paused, wavered, then moved on. He let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. But there was no time for relief. Not now. Slowly, silently, he began to crawl, inch by inch, through the thick mud, away from the voices, away from the light. Every sound became an enemy. The crack of a twig beneath his knee, the slurp of mud as he shifted his weight. the rasp of fabric against the wet earth. To him, each noise was deafening, each one a flare to the searchers above. He forced himself slower, slower still, until he was little more than a shadow shifting in the dark. The minutes stretched into eternity. From the village came the toll of another bell, not church this time warning. His blood ran cold. They knew. They all knew. Farmers left their houses with lanterns swinging, dogs on leashes straining, children running wide-eyed behind. The countryside itself seemed to turn against him. The hunters were not just soldiers now. They were everyone. Civilians with sharp eyes, locals who knew every path, every hollow, every place where a man might hide. This was no random search. It was a net, and he was caught inside it. Darrell pushed on, reaching a thicket of tall grass. He slid into it, chest heaving, mud dripping from his hands. The grass closed over him, a small cocoon of silence. He dared to look up through the stalks. Against the cloudy sky, shapes moved, silhouettes of men with rifles slung across their shoulders, flashlights bobbing as they combed the fields. Voices barked commands. Dogs yipped, pulling at their leads, noses to the ground. He shrank lower, praying the scent of mud and sweat would confuse them. The sound of boots drew nearer. Crunch, crunch, crunch. He held his breath. A flashlight beam pierced the grass, white light washing across his face for an instant. He shut his eyes, forced his body still, heart thundering in his chest. The beam lingered, then shifted, then passed. The soldier moved on. Relief threatened to flood him, but he swallowed it. This was only the beginning. He could not simply hide here until dawn. The search would only tighten with every hour. He needed distance. He needed darkness. He needed a plan. The radio at his side crackled faintly. He flinched, clamping a hand over it, muffling the sound. Static whispered, then silence. Not yet. Rescue was out there, but answering now would be suicide. The enemy was too close. He switched it to low power, tucking it deeper into his vest. Later, when the night was his again. Not now. Somewhere close, a dog barked sharply. His stomach turned to stone. The bark was followed by the guttural encouragement of its handler. The animal had caught a scent. The grass rustled. Heavy steps thudded closer. Adrenaline surged, ice and fire through his veins. His hand found his knife. His training screamed at him to be ready, but his heart begged him to stay still. Killing the dog might save him for a moment, but only for a moment. The owner would see. The squad would descend, and then he would be finished. The grass parted. The dog's head appeared, eyes bright, nose quivering. Time slowed. Zelko's grip on the knife tightened. His muscles coiled. The animal sniffed once, twice. Its ears pricked. Then, with a sudden snort, it turned, tail wagging, bounding back to its handler. A shout of annoyance, the tug of a leash, footsteps retreating. The breath Zelko had held escaped in a silent rush. He dropped the knife back into its sheath, trembling. Tonight, mercy had saved him. Or luck, or both. Above the fields, a flare suddenly burst into light. The world went white for an instant, shadows leaping long across the ground. He pressed himself flat as the light washed over the thicket, over the ditch, over the road. Voices rose louder, excited, pointing. The search was intensifying. The noose was drawing tighter. He had to move. Low, careful, he slipped from the grass, belly to the earth, and crawled toward the darker outline of a small grove of trees. Each movement was agony, his body screaming for rest, but fear kept him alive. Step by step, breath by breath, shadow to shadow. Behind him, the countryside blazed with activity lights, engines, voices, dogs. Ahead, the trees promised at least the cover of darkness. He pushed onward, inch by inch, until the first roots clawed at his fingers and the shadows swallowed him whole. Only then did he stop. Only then did he allow himself to breathe. The night closed around him, thick and silent. The hunt raged behind, but he had gained a few precious yards, a few precious moments. And in survival, moments could mean everything. The ghost had vanished again. But how long could he stay unseen, with the entire countryside hunting him? The forest swallowed him, but it did not welcome him. The trees loomed like dark sentinels, their bare branches clawing at the low sky. The air was thick, damp, and cold, and the mud clung to his boots and gloves with every movement. Lieutenant Colonel Darrell Zelko pressed himself against the rough bark of a trunk, listening, always listening. Behind him, the world still roared with pursuit engines, voices, dogs, and the far-off crackle of radios. Ahead of him, silence. A silence so deep that it seemed to press against his ears. He knew better than to trust it. Silence in enemy territory was never safety. It was only an illusion, and illusions killed. He crouched low, his breath slow and deliberate. His entire body shook from adrenaline and exhaustion. The ejection, the crash, the run, the crawl through the fields, every muscle screamed in protest. He had trained for this. Survival, evasion, resistance, escape, ser. The holy letters hammered into him in years of instruction. But training was theory, rehearsals in controlled chaos. This was the unfiltered reality, wet, cold, hunted, and utterly alone. He checked his watch. Barely past 23. He had been on the ground for less than an hour, and already it felt like days. He shifted, pressing deeper into the shadows of the trees. The mud on his face had dried in patches, tightening like a mask. He smeared another streak across his cheeks, disguising the pale of his skin. The orange flare of his parachute haunted him still. Somewhere, perhaps not far, Serbian soldiers were holding pieces of it, waving them like trophies. Proof that the ghost was real, that the invisible plane bled, that the hunter could become the hunted. He cursed the color under his breath, stealth undone by something as stupid as a piece of fabric. A rustle broke his thoughts. He froze. Not 30 yards away, a flashlight beam danced between the trees. Soldiers. He flattened against the trunk, forcing himself smaller, tighter. The beam swung left, then right. A voice barked an order in Serbian. Another answered. The men moved slowly, carefully, rifles raised, their boots squelched in the wet ground. The beam came closer, closer. For a moment, it was only feet away. He could see the faint silhouette of the man holding it, the cigarette glowing faintly between his lips. The soldier paused, exhaled smoke into the night, then turned, muttering something. The beam drifted away. The footsteps receded. Zelko waited, still as stone, until the voices faded. Only then did he dare move. Every step had to be chosen. He slid between trees, crouched low, stepping only on moss or soft earth. Noise was the enemy. Distance was salvation. But distance was slow, painfully slow. For half an hour, he advanced less than 100 meters, weaving between thickets, skirting the edges of open ground, always listening, always waiting. Each time the search flared up nearby, he stopped, dropped, and vanished into the earth. The cold gnawed at him. Even under his flight suit, even with the adrenaline, the damp air seeped in. He had prepared for high-altitude chill, not this swampy bite of Balkan spring nights. His gloves were soaked through, his boots heavy with mud, his stomach clenched, demanding food. He had survival rations, but the crack of a wrapper could give him away. Hunger would have to wait. Everything would have to wait until he was truly alone. Hours passed. Midnight came and went. The search grew louder again, then quieter, then louder still. He realized with a sinking heart that they were not giving up. This was not a half-hearted sweep. It was a hunt, coordinated, relentless. A man with his rank shot down in a plane that was supposed to be invincible. Every patrol, every villager, every militia unit wanted to be the one to bring him in. He wasn't just a target, he was a prize. At one point, from a hollow, he saw headlights weaving across a nearby road, trucks filled with soldiers. He counted 3, maybe 4. He sank lower, eyes barely above the edge of the ditch. The men dismounted, fanning out. Their flashlights flickered like fireflies across the fields. A whistle shrilled. Dogs barked furiously. He pressed his forehead into the mud, hands covering the back of his head, making himself a shadow among shadows. A beam swept past, lingering only inches above him. His lungs screamed for air. He held still. Then, mercifully, the light moved on. In the endless waiting, his mind wandered. He saw his family, his mother, his father, their home. He thought of the words he had muttered after ejecting. Asterisk, Mom is not gonna be happy about this. Asterisk, the absurdity of it almost made him laugh. Here he was, hunted by half a country, and all he could think of was disappointing his mother. The thought steadied him, anchored him. He would see them again. He had to. The hours dragged. Around 2, drizzle began to fall. Light but steady. The drops tapped against the leaves, masking small noises, giving him cover. But they also made the ground slick, the mud deeper, the cold sharper. His teeth clenched against the shivers. He pressed on, crawling through the underbrush, finding a new position deeper into the forest. Each move took all his willpower. Each yard was paid for in sweat and silence. Then came the dogs again, louder this time, closer. Their handlers urged them on, voices carrying. The barks were sharper, angrier. He ducked under a fallen log, pressing flat beneath it. Mud seeped into his collar, down his back. The dogs came within meters. He could hear them panting, claws scratching. One growled low, snuffling the ground. His knife was in his hand again before he knew it. The handle slick with rain and sweat. The growl deepened. His muscles coiled. And then another voice called out. The handler yanked the leash. The dogs barked wildly, but were pulled away. The sound receded. His body sagged in relief. Another escape. But how many more could he survive? By 3. Fatigue gnawed at him. His eyes burned. His muscles shook uncontrollably. He forced himself to stay awake, to keep moving, to push deeper into the woods. He found a small hollow beneath the roots of an ancient tree and collapsed there, curling into himself, shivering. He allowed himself a mouthful of water from his canteen, then clamped it shut. He pulled his survival radio, switched it on for a second, listening. Static. Then a faint voice. Vega 31. This is magic. Do you copy? His heart leapt. He pressed the button, but hesitated. Voices still echoed nearby. If he answered now, if they triangulated the signal, he shoved the radio back. Not yet. Not yet. The night stretched on, endless. Each minute a lifetime, each sound a threat, each breath a victory. He had become a ghost again, but a ghost hunted by hundreds. And dawn was coming, and dawn could be salvation, or it could be death. The first light of dawn crept slowly into the forest, painting the wet branches in shades of gray and silver. Lieutenant Colonel Daryl Zelko lay half-buried beneath the roots of an old oak, his body stiff, his flight suit soaked, his mind fighting the fog of exhaustion. Every nerve screamed for rest, but rest meant capture, and capture was not an option. He forced his eyes open again and again, refusing to let them close for more than a blink. Dawn was here, and dawn changed everything. The night had been a cloak, however thin. In darkness, he could melt into the shadows, disappear among trees and mud. But daylight was merciless. Every movement risked exposure. Every gap in the canopy could betray him. He knew the hunters would not stop. In fact, morning would make their search easier. Villagers rising for chores, children playing, farmers walking the fields, all could become unwilling spotters. He wasn't just hunted by soldiers. He was hunted by an entire landscape. He shifted slightly, stretching stiff muscles. The forest smelled of wet earth and smoke. Somewhere not far, fires had been lit. The crackle of radios drifted through the air. Voices clipped and alert. He caught fragments in Serbian, too far to understand clearly, but the tone was unmistakable, organized, persistent, close. He closed his eyes for a second, pressing his forehead into his sleeve. Just a little longer. He only needed a little longer. He pulled the survival radio again, hands trembling with cold. Static filled his ears. Then a faint voice broke through. Vega 31. This is magic. Do you copy? Over. His heart thudded. He pressed the button, whispering as quietly as possible. Magic. Vega 31. I copy. The reply was almost immediate. Vega 31, authenticate. He rattled off the code, the words clumsy on dry lips. Silence followed for a heartbeat that felt like eternity. Then, authentication correct. We have your signal. Hold position. We're coming. Relief surged through him, hot and dizzying. For a moment he wanted to collapse, to laugh, to cry. But he forced himself still. They were coming, but so were the others. Minutes dragged into half an hour. The morning grew brighter, the forest alive with birds and distant human voices. A tractor engine rumbled faintly. A rooster crowed. He could almost believe this was an ordinary village morning, except for the soldiers. Their shouts came closer, sharper now, more insistent. He pressed lower into the roots, barely daring to breathe. Boots crunched nearby, two voices arguing. One spat on the ground, the other chuckled darkly. They were so close he could smell the tobacco on their breath. He froze, every muscle locked. His hand hovered over the knife at his side. The soldiers lingered, scanning the trees. Then, with a muttered curse, they moved on. His pulse thundered in his ears long after they were gone. The radio crackled again. Vega 31, this is magic. Rescue team inbound. ETA 20 minutes. Can you move to open terrain? He swallowed hard. Open terrain was death if he chose wrong. Negative. Too many hostiles. I'll hold. Copy. Stay put. We'll guide them in. Time distorted. Every second felt like an hour. The forest was alive with movement, now soldiers fanning out, villagers watching, dogs barking. He heard the distant rumble of helicopters, low and steady. Friend or foe? His chest tightened. If it was them, he was saved. If it wasn't, everything ended here. Then he saw it. A dark figure slipping between the trees. Crouched low, moving with a rhythm he recognized. Not a villager, not a soldier. Different, professional. His radio hissed again. Vega 31, signal flare. Now, he hesitated. A flare was a beacon, a shout of times here I am, times to the entire countryside. But he had no choice. With shaking hands, he pulled it, struck it, and the bright red fire hissed into the sky. Shouts erupted instantly, Serbian voices, angry and loud. But the figure moved faster now, waving, motioning. Two more figures appeared behind him. Armed, alert, their movements crisp and purposeful. Americans, his people. Gunfire cracked in the distance. The shouts grew louder, but the rescuers reached him, hands pulling him up, voices sharp and steady. Sir, we've got you. Time to go. His legs barely held, but they dragged him forward, weaving through the trees. More gunfire, closer now. The thumping roar of rotor blades filled the sky. He stumbled, pushed, carried. Every step was a war against gravity, against fear, against the weight of a night that had lasted a lifetime. The forest broke into a clearing. The helicopter hovered, kicking up wind and debris, its side door gaping open, machine gun bristling. Soldiers sprinted, covering, firing warning shots into the tree line. Hands shoved him forward, up, into the belly of the bird. The door slammed, the helicopter lifted, engines screaming. Below, the soldiers and villagers poured into the clearing, shouting, waving fists, firing futile shots into the sky. But the helicopter rose higher, higher, carrying him away. Daryl Zelko collapsed onto the floor, eyes closed, chest heaving. The longest night was over. He was going home. The helicopter's rotors pounded the sky as it banked hard westward, away from the hostile hills of Serbia and toward the open fields that stretched to friendly territory. Daryl Zelko lay slumped against the vibrating metal floor, every muscle trembling, his body a map of bruises and cuts. The cold that had gnawed at him for 36 hours now gave way to the burning heat of adrenaline wearing off. His hands still shook, his lips cracked and dry. He had been saved, yet part of him refused to believe it. One of the pararescuemen crouched beside him, helmet visor lifted, voice steady but loud over the roar of the engines. "You're safe now, sir. Just breathe. We've got you." Zelko nodded weakly, unable to form words. Safe. The word felt foreign, unreal. His mind replayed the crunch of boots in the snow, the voices that had passed inches from where he lay buried in roots. It played the sound of dogs barking, of villagers murmuring, of gunfire snapping in the trees. He could still taste the dirt he had pressed into his mouth to silence his breath. And yet here he was, lifted into the sky, slipping out of the enemy's grasp. The helicopter raced over the border, and with it came a change in atmosphere. The tension in the rescuers' shoulders loosened, their clipped movements softening. They were clear. For the first time since the missile struck his F-117, Daryl Zelko was no longer in enemy hands or on the verge of falling into them. He was back in the arms of his own. When the helicopter finally touched down on the tarmac at Tuzla Air Base, the ramp dropped and medics rushed forward. Strong hands guided him out, doctors checking his pulse, his vision, his wounds. Questions poured at him in rapid bursts: name, rank, pain level, last meal. He answered automatically, his voice hoarse, his brain half frozen in disbelief. Cameras flashed in the distance. Somewhere, commanders waited. But for now, he was rushed into a waiting C-130, bound for Aviano in Italy. The flight across the Adriatic felt dreamlike. He sat wrapped in a blanket, IV lines feeding fluid into his dehydrated body. He stared out the small porthole at the Black Sea beneath them, its waves glowing faintly in moonlight. Only now, in the cocoon of friendly aircraft, did the enormity of it all crash against him. He had survived an ejection. He had survived a night hunted by hundreds. He had survived the closest brush with death he could imagine. His jaw tightened, eyes wet. He hadn't allowed himself a single tear on the ground. Now, in the quiet hum of the cargo bay, one slid down his cheek before he wiped it away. Hours later, the C-130 touched down in Aviano, its wheels screeching against the runway. As the hatch opened, floodlights bathed the plane in blinding white. A crowd awaited him. Officers, security, medical staff, intelligence officers. Cameras were kept at bay, but the atmosphere buzzed with the electricity of history. They weren't just welcoming back a pilot. They were welcoming back the first man to ever be shot down in a stealth fighter, a living piece of an unfolding war. As he stepped onto the tarmac, his legs wobbled under him. A cheer rose from the gathered personnel, restrained but unmistakably proud. He managed a weak smile, raising one hand in acknowledgement. Inside, though, the exhaustion was absolute. He wanted nothing more than a bed, silence, and sleep without fear. Instead, he was ushered quickly into a waiting vehicle and driven straight into the secure compound. There, in a sterile white room, he faced the first of many debriefings. Intelligence officers leaned forward with notebooks and recorders, their questions precise and urgent. What did he see when the missile struck? Did the Serbs employ radar differently than expected? How close did the searchers come? What villages did he pass? Every detail mattered, every memory a piece of the puzzle that might prevent the next pilot from being shot down. He answered as best he could, though his mind blurred the details into a haze of fear and instinct. They pressed on, careful but relentless, scribbling down his words as though each syllable carried the weight of victory or defeat. Finally, after hours of questioning, the officers relented. A doctor placed a hand on his shoulder and guided him toward the infirmary. Clean sheets, warm lights, the faint hum of machines. It was a world away from mud, frost, and silence. Daryl Zelko collapsed into the bed, the smell of starch and disinfectant strangely comforting. Before sleep claimed him, one thought circled in his mind like a whisper. Asterisk, I made it out, but I'll never be the same. Asterisk, news of the downed F-117 spread like wildfire across the globe. Military channels buzzed with disbelief. The unthinkable had happened. A stealth aircraft designed to be invisible to radar, untouchable by conventional means, had been shot down. Serbian forces celebrated quietly at first, a mixture of pride and disbelief etched on the faces of Lieutenant Colonel Zoltan Dani and his team. They had done what many thought impossible. They had grounded a ghost. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, the United States Air Force and NATO headquarters were stunned. Analysts pored over radar logs, satellite feeds, and mission data. Questions flooded in from commanders, ministers, and intelligence officers. How had a stealth fighter been detected? How had it been tracked and successfully engaged? How would this change the balance of power in the skies? Every piece of information mattered. Every angle had to be examined. Back in Aviano, Zelko lay recovering, aware that he was now a central figure in a story that would make headlines, become case studies in military schools, and enter the annals of aviation history. He listened as officers discussed the geopolitical ramifications, the media leaks, and the inevitable political debates in Washington and Belgrade. The weight of it all was surreal. Even in the hospital bed, he reflected on the sequence of events. The stormy sky, the tension of his missile lock, the violent spin, and the split-second decision to eject. He thought of the skill and courage of the Serbian crew, the calculations of Dani, and the precision that had brought him to the brink of death. There was no resentment, only a strange respect. He had been defeated that night, yet he had survived. Days later, after full debriefings and media statements, Zelko was allowed a moment of quiet. He walked through the base perimeter, listening to the hum of jets taking off in the distance, feeling the wind on his face. The world was still the same, yet nothing was as it had been for him. The mission that began as a routine strike had transformed into a personal story of survival, skill, and the razor's edge between life and death. In interviews years later, Zelko would describe it simply: the F-117 was supposed to be invisible. We trained for that. But that night, things went differently. I respect the skill of those who shot me down. They were doing their duty, just as I was doing mine. And somehow, I got to live to tell the story. He never forgot the lessons of that night: vigilance, respect for the enemy, and the unpredictable nature of war. Though the Nighthawk would forever be a symbol of technological might, that mission became a story of human skill and chance. The wreckage of his aircraft, preserved in Belgrade's Museum of Aviation, remains a silent testament to the encounter. It is a reminder that even the most advanced technology is matched, and sometimes surpassed, by courage, ingenuity, and the human element. As the sun set over Aviano, Zelko watched the sky with a quiet understanding. He had flown into the storm and returned, carrying the weight of history on his shoulders. The world remembered the event, the victories, the failures, but for him, it was also deeply personal. Some nights, when he closed his eyes, he could still feel the spin, the fire, the near impossibility of surviving. And yet, there was gratitude in that memory. Gratitude for the hands that guided him to safety, for the parachute that opened in time, for the chance to live, reflect, and honor both the mission and the lives entwined with it. The story ends here, but the legacy remains, a testament to bravery, to the razor-thin line between life and death, and to the unpredictable, humbling nature of warfare.